you know, because I feel like at some point in my career, it was just about fighting to get the crowd to pay attention. And but when nowadays, like especially when I started working at Mission Pro, I was like, oh, okay, like I don't got to like fight for their attention for the seats that they paid for. You know, they
Yeah.
already they already respect women's wrestling to begin with. Now I like we're able to just be ourselves and do like, you know, do our thing. And I I truly believe, I think this has got to be the best, I guess you would say, era of women's wrestling. I love it. I love the sisterhood. It's something that I didn't have whenever I first started working. I was the only girl at my school. So whenever we would run shows or be at training, you know, I didn't like you need to just have that sisterhood. You need to have that shared experience with somebody. So whenever I came to, you know, to Mission Pro, to Reality of Wrestling, these places that are giving, first of all, not more than just one women's wrestling match. You have a little bit of a bigger locker room. You know, they taught me how to do my makeup. They gave me gear advice. It was, I love how, and not just among the girls too. I think what's really cool, and I feel like the internet is to thank for this, is guys are much more protective of the girls. Not really in like a making them feel uncomfortable, like a crowding them type of way.
Like a brother kind of sticking up for the baby girl, yeah, baby sister kind of thing, or the sister, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I was just walking like outside the venue and this car like just starts driving up real slow next to me. And then I see like another wrestler outside taking a smoke. I'm like, here you go. I just have this high behind. I'm like, and he's like,
he just was like, can I help you? Yeah. You get this like 6'8" guy come walking over and talks. The guy keeps driving like, oh no, I didn't say nothing. All right, let's start with Xenia, and this is a question I think you and I have talked about before. But where are we at today's wrestling landscape with regards to women's wrestling? How far do we still need to go? How far have we come? And are we in a women's wrestling renaissance?
We've definitely talked about this before, but yes, I do believe that we're in the women's wrestling renaissance. I do believe that women are starting to get treated more equally to male talent. Still a long way to go. Like I always like to say that there's no gendered issue in wrestling that isn't a reflection of just a global gendered issue. According to the UN, I think, or something like that. I don't know, something, I can't remember. But according to a study, we're only going to reach gender equality in about 350 years. Which I think even that is generous. I think even that is an optimistic estimate, because it's, you know, if we can overrun thousands of years of oppression in 300 years, that's a success in my book. So I do think that in wrestling, as well as in real life and as well as in the real world, we still have a long way to go. But, you know, even like at AWRH, like they're doing a great job with their women's roster, and RH, I think, out of the televised promotions, has the biggest percentage of women's wrestling screen time right now, which is a great success. I wish AW caught up with that a little bit as well. I have asked the question at press conferences. I have asked, like, is there, are you guys working towards leveling out the percentage of screen time between men and the women? And I'm always told that yes, we're working on it, and it just depends on the valuable storylines. And at the last press conference that I was at in London, Tony Khan actually said that they're growing their writer team, that there's almost 100 people working on the AW creative. So that's, you know, that's great to see. And I know it can't happen overnight, but I also know that it is urgent. Like, we can't just say that, like, oh yeah, we're slowly working on change. No, the change can be gradual, but has to be radical, the way I see it. And it's always good for me to see, again, a more fair share of women's matches on the card, at least. Like, that's the very, like, smallest thing that you can do for women's representation. as well as more meaningful storylines, and as well as, that's another thing that they talked about last time that we brought it up, the position of the women's matches in the card. Because a lot of the time, the women's match becomes the bathroom break or the popcorn break, not because it's a bad match or not because there's not a compelling storyline, but because of the match that it follows. And it can't not be something that a good wrestling promoter realizes. So that's also something that even the bigger shows have to work on. And we actually saw an example of that defying the odds of that on an AEW pay-per-view just recently when Chris Statlander and Willow had their street fight, and they went after arguably one of the best matches of the year. And everyone's reaction was, how are they going to top that? And they absolutely held their ground, and it was probably my favorite match on the whole entire pay-per-view. So women once again proved that they can hold their ground and they can be at the same level as the men. They just have to be given the conditions by the promoter, by the booker, to be able to show that. Because when people walk out of the room during the women's match to go to the bathroom, that doesn't happen during the match because they don't like it. That happens before the match. So what we have to do is we have to prep the fan so that, like I said, there's a compelling storyline, so that they know and respect the talent, know that they can show great matches, and so that they're in a spot on the card that is not doomed to become a bathroom break.
Very well said. And of course, women's tag belts. Excuse me, women's tag belts. I was like retelling this story. One of my first independent shows I ever went to was in New Bern, North Carolina. This tiny like rec center. There's probably 200 fans, and there was only one women's match, and it was right before the intermission. But what was great is they stole the show. Like they were tremendous. And it got to the point where they were doing all kinds of great spots, and there was a story. There's storytelling that, but in independent wrestling, you can't really do a story before the match unless you're paying attention to social media. But the storytelling in the ring with the expressions and how the baby face was getting beat down and then suddenly she was rising up. What was great was I could see the curtain, and the guys that had their upcoming matches were peeking around, and they were going like, damn. I could tell they were going like, we gotta step up our matches because these ladies are stealing it. And sure enough, I mean, they were the most memorable match of the whole night was those ladies. But I want to shoot over to Angel next. It does sound like, part of it is the booking, and when you get the one women's match is in that 30 minutes before right before the main event spot, it is kind of the death spot. But then again, you got Chris Statlander and Willow just bringing it, and defying those odds. Angel, your thoughts on what Xenia was saying, as well as your perspective on women's wrestling.
Yeah, no, women's wrestling has been way more accepted than it has been in years past, for sure, 100%. But like we were saying, like booking can be a problem, but like Willow and Chris definitely did define that. But a lot of the times, whenever there is something like that, to where like the match is like put at a very bad spot on the card, most of the time those matches flop, or not the match itself, but the actual viewership, because everyone's going and doing whatever they're doing. But one of the things I honestly want to see in women's wrestling, this is a little bit off to the side, but since women's wrestling has been so accepted recently, one of the things I want to see is like a weekly show, like just for the women, to get them out there and get these storylines out there, and like have maybe a couple matches, a couple segments, maybe like hour or two long, and that's it. Because that, honestly, I feel like would really do a lot for just women's wrestling in general.
I like that. J.Christian, your thoughts?
To be honest, I agree with both Xenia and Angel. But also, you have to look at it by promotion, because obviously WWE and TNA, they are just killing it with their women's divisions, especially TNA. who pretty much ever since they brought back the Knockouts tag team titles, they have been firing on all cylinders. Obviously, NXT, you're going to have a lot of these women come from different sports or different backgrounds, and they're basically out there just roughing it. Ring of Honor, obviously, their issue is just being behind a paywall, just to basically, I mean, because it's like I said earlier before we press record on this, Athena is their top star over in Ring of Honor. I just think they need more time to be put on the air. And obviously with AEW, you know, they just need to have more women's competitors go more than just the usual picture-in-picture break type of match. And as far as the NWA goes, they had it with Empower, and they bombed. I wouldn't say they bombed hard. I mean, they're trying at least to be relevant, but it's just that other forces in that promotion, which have been around for the longest amount of time since 1948, or other forces in that promotion just been dragging it down, so to speak. But still, though, I think that when it comes down to women's wrestling, there needs to be more promotion behind it. I mean, you can't just go and look at stuff like what's going on in Stardom or what's going on overseas in Japan and in Europe, or even in Mexico, south of the border, just to even look and see what a great women's wrestler is. They need to at least try and do more of that promoting here in the States rather than just, look abroad, so to speak.